All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, just a couple of the normal reminders. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. You can type those in by clicking that Q&A section or the chat section in the lower portion of your control panel. We'll be posting a recording of the webinar on our blog. The link for that will be shown at the end. And if you'd like a PDF copy of the presentation, there will be a link to download that on that same post as the recording. If your question does not get answered today, or if you think of anything after, please email our support inbox, which will be shown at the end as well. All right, so what is on the agenda for today? Fat. It's a word that most people think of in a negative way, right? And fat in our foods specifically was something that was advertised to be the worst thing you could possibly eat really not too long ago. But times have changed along with our knowledge on how fat in our diets affects our health. Now, it's still a complicated topic and it's not all black and white, but my goal today is to make it maybe a little bit clearer, hopefully. I'll show you that fat is not our enemy. So we're going to talk about the types of fats in our food. We'll talk about the pros and cons and which types you want to include more in your diet. We'll go over some tips to increase healthy fat intake and then give you a few yummy recipes to try. So just a real quick overview, because I'm going to be diving into each of these types of fat into more detail. Here are four main types of dietary fat: saturated, trans, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. Each type of fat has different chemical structures and physical properties, and therefore have different effects on our bodies. The most recent guidelines suggest 20 to 35% of your daily calories coming from fat. Again, I'm going to dive into this further here in a few minutes and break it down even more with the recommendations. But first, I want to touch high level on the main benefits that fats have on our health, because yes, they do have lots and lots of benefits. Fat is essential to us. Our bodies need it for many reasons. So I'm just going to name a few of the main ones. It's a major source of energy for us. It's needed for cell function, specifically building the membranes around our cells. It helps our body absorb vitamins and minerals, specifically vitamins A, D, E, and K. And it's really beneficial for brain health in general as well. It helps the body fight inflammation, which can cause all sorts of problems if it's not regulated. And then for day-to-day purposes, fat also plays a role in satiety, so keeping you fuller longer. This can help with weight maintenance and weight loss. Now, this isn't the whole list again, but you get the idea. Fats are really important and helpful to us and should not be avoided. But going back to the different types of fat I mentioned in the last slide, there are certain types that have been shown to have more benefits than others when it comes to whether we should be getting more or less of it. So let's dive into each area. I'm going to start with the one that pretty much across the board we know we want to stay away from whenever we can: trans fat. There are natural and artificial forms of trans fat, and it's the artificial that we need to be concerned with. Artificial trans fats are known as industrial trans fats or partially hydrogenated fats. So these come about when vegetable oils and are chemically altered to stay solid at room temperature, which makes them last a lot longer, giving them a longer shelf life, if you will, which businesses try to do all the time, right? Make their foods last longer. So it may make sense then that these partially hydrogenated vegetable oils are found mainly in highly processed foods. So why do we need to avoid them? Well, they have zero of the healthy fat benefits I just talked about. They can also increase your risk of heart disease. They can cause inflammation in our bodies, which can lead to other health issues. It can cause issues with things like your blood vessels, and then studies have found possible links to certain cancers. So yeah, best just to stay away from these. And the great thing is that in 2018, the FDA in the United States, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, passed the use of partially hydrogenated oils in most processed foods, which was effective. They had to have it done by 2020. Now, while they're technically banned, there may be some products out there that were made prior to the ban taking place because they last so long, right? Also, manufacturers can label their product trans fat free as long as there are fewer than 0.5 grams of trans fat per serving. And while that may seem like a really small amount, if your diet consists of a lot of processed foods with some of these oils in them, that small amount can add up, right? And you can still get some of those negative health effects. So really the point with this is read your labels carefully, even if it says trans fat free, or even if you don't think of things, look and see if you see like partially hydrogenated ingredients. And then if you do see those, do what you can to limit your consumption of those types of products, okay? So trans fat is something we definitely want to stay away from as much as we can. All right, saturated fats. These are the things you're going to find in more your animal-based foods, your dairy, your butter, and then some oils. So this is where coconut oil will fall. Also, you'll see a lot of times eggs fall into the saturated fat category. In reality, a large egg has 5 grams of fat, but 3 of those grams are from the poly and monounsaturated. So I'm going to put those on those lists instead. Okay. So, and on that note, actually, many of the foods you eat have more than just one type of fat in them. They usually have a combo. So for my purposes, I'm talking about the type of fat that they have the most of. So saturated fats is where we get a little grayish and not so black and white with research and recommendations. Okay, so saturated fats were historically said to raise LDL, which is our bad cholesterol. So the recommendation between different organizations vary on how much saturated fat they think someone should eat. I told you that the recommendation was 20 to 35% of total calories coming from that overall fat sources, right? That means all of the different fats. So for saturated fat specifically, you'll see some areas like American Heart Association, for example, recommends like 5 to 6% of your daily calories coming from saturated fat specifically. Some will say around 10%, with the recommendation pointing again more towards those poly or monounsaturated fats, getting more of your percentages from those of that 20 to 35%. Now, there are yet other research groups out there saying that's not enough because saturated fats, first of all, may not be as bad as originally thought, and which I think is probably more of a point, while they may not be perfect for everyone, it can be worse for health if someone replaces those fats with processed carbohydrates and sugars, which is a lot of times what happens in those low fat options that you see, right? So it's kind of like, what's worse, right? Do we want some saturated fat that could affect us this way? Or do we want a bunch more processed carbohydrates and sugars, which could be worse? So that's where those arguments come from with saturated fat specifically. And I want to circle back around to coconut oil for a second, because I feel like, it can be confusing. And honestly, it is. But coconut oil, there's differing opinions on it, right? So about 90% of the fat in coconut oil is saturated, which is typically, again, considered maybe not the best option when you've got these other options. But there's something called medium chain triglycerides, or MCT, might sound more familiar to you, that's in coconut oil that may have specific benefits when it comes to HDL, which is our healthy cholesterol that we want more of, right? So those that are pro coconut oil, point to this specific benefit. Those that are not as much on the coconut oil train say that while there may be some HDL benefits, it also raises that LDL, that bad cholesterol. So it's not maybe as good of a choice as some of these other fats that we're going to talk about. If it sounds like it's not straightforward, it's not, right? More research will continue to come out with more long-term effects. But until then, you kind of have to decide for yourself. Again, you can find arguments on both sides. I'm not saying either one. I eat coconut oil myself, but it's going to depend. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here too. Butter is another one of those things that has arguments for both sides. Butter has about 60% saturated fat, but also has the rest is the good poly and monounsaturated too, right? And then when you look for substitutions for butter, a lot of them have a bunch of chemicals and not so good stuff added. So in this case, it's probably more like, let's just do real food in moderation, right? But again, it's ultimately going to be up to you on which route you want to go. And I'm seeing some cheese in the chat already, because of course I've got cheese up here. So what about my cheese, you may ask? Well, it is high in saturated fats, right? And the thing with cheese is, on a different note, it can have a lot of sodium. So if you're watching your salt intake, you have to be mindful of that. But in moderation, again, cheese has a lot of stuff going for it. It's got calcium, it's got protein. The good quality cheeses have probiotics in them. Now, again, these are the good, fresh, the mozzarellas, the feta, the blue cheese, the good quality cheeses, no Kraft slices, sorry about that. But in moderation, again, cheese has a lot of positives too. But again, it does have it's mostly saturated fat. So, but you just have to be mindful. So really, here's the deal. Here's the point I want to make with saturated fats. Just like any type of diet or exercise plan or whatever it is, some things work better for some people and don't as much for others. So for saturated fats, the most important thing to do is figure out what's best for you. Some people are affected more by certain foods, including fats, right? I have hereditary high cholesterol, for example, and I find that if I stay more towards the balance, more veggies and maybe more of those poly and monounsaturated fats, that my numbers typically respond better. But that's not going to be the case maybe for you, right? Diets like keto, which is high fat, high protein, can be really effective short term for something like weight loss. So you need to consider your goals as well. I know we all want this cookie cutter way to live and know exactly what and how and when to eat, but it's never going to be that simple. Each and every one of our bodies is different, right? But if your goal is overall health, you should be looking at eating more whole foods, cutting down on processed ones, okay? If you do this, you're likely going to find a great balance of all of the different types of fats, along with your fruits and your veggies and your other healthy carbohydrates, proteins, all that good stuff to make you feel better. So I really am a fan of just keeping it simple, not stressing out too much, but the more you eat real food and less processed, the better you're going to find that balance is on these fats too, okay? So with that being said, let's look at those last couple types of fat that most people agree are going to be those best choices and that they do have those great benefits that we talked about at the beginning. So first is monounsaturated. I'm not going to get too sciencey because I'm not that smart, but they get this name because they have just one unsaturated carbon bond called a double bond. These groups of fats are going to include things like your olive oil, avocado, peanut, almond butter, and then your nuts, like your almonds, cashews, peanuts, pecans, and of course those eggs that I said I was going to throw into this category. And then we have the polyunsaturated fats. So these fats are known as essential because the body can't make them. You must get them from foods. You probably heard of omega-3 fatty acids, right? Those are a type of polyunsaturated fats that are known specifically to be very beneficial. You can get these types of fats from fish, fatty fish specifically, salmon, herring, sardines, tuna, trout, and then from walnuts and some seeds like flax seeds and chia seeds. And then again, I threw those eggs on there as well. So I want to dive into the omega fatty acids for a minute here. A lot of you've heard of omega-3, and I'm sure some of you may have heard that there are a couple others, omega-6 and omega-9. Maybe not, maybe you have, but there are 3 different types. So let's break those down and talk about what we currently know about those. So there's actually different types of omega-3s as well. The three most common being EPA, DHA, and ALA. I'm not going to get into what those actual words are because I won't be able to pronounce them. But these three areas all carry their own benefits. So EPA can help that inflammation that we talked about. There's also some research that it can help symptoms of depression for EPA. DHA is big on brain development and function, which is why you see that in most baby formulas. And ALA appears to be the best with the heart, immune system, and nervous system. So there's not official recommendations for daily intake, but there's some guidelines that suggest around 250 to 300 milligrams per day of omega-3. And again, oily fish and salmon, like salmon and sardines, are the best source of EPA and DHA. And then plant sources, chia seeds, walnuts, and flax seeds are going to be heavier on that ALA. So again, if you have a balanced diet of these proteins and fats and plant-based foods, you tend to get what you need, right? Okay, what's the deal with omega-6? These mainly provide energy for our body. So recommendations are around 17 grams for males, 12 grams for females per day. The most common omega-6 is linoleic acid, which the body converts to other fats that are pro-inflammatory. Now, you may think, okay, I just said inflammation is bad, so they make more inflammation, so I better stay away from those, right? But our body needs pro-inflammatory acids because our immune system uses inflammation to help fight disease, right? But when the body produces too much, then we have those health issues come up. So it's a balance of getting the right amount. So it's typically good to get more of the omega-3s than the 6s, just to have that good balance, which makes sense, right? So major sources of omega-6 in our diets include things like soybean and corn oil, mayonnaise, and then nuts like walnuts, almonds, cashews, and then seeds like sunflower seeds. So there's another side note, right? I just told you that walnuts are a good source of omega-3, right? Nuts like those they have both omega-3 and omega-6, but the ratios are even, which is what we want. We want the good ratios. But with those oils that I mentioned, they're in so many of the foods, the more of the processed foods that we typically eat, that the amount of omega-6 versus omega-3 gets way out of whack because of that inflammation factor. Most Western diets have way more omega-6 than omega-3s. So research points to a good ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s being between a 1-to-1 ratio, so even, up to a 4-to-1, just because we're likely going to get more omega-6s, but if we can keep it to that 4-to-1 ratio or below, we're going to be in a better spot with that inflammation amount. So most of us, if we would actually look into it, are probably more like a 15-to-1 ratio, again, just with the Western diet. So best action item here, look to cut down on foods with those oils, which again, are going to be in a lot of our processed foods, right? And again, whole food wins. And then we have omega-9 fatty acids, which is the least known. The body can actually produce omega-9s, which is probably why we don't hear about them, because they're not considered essential. There's some research pointing to benefits for inflammation, insulin sensitivity. Oleic acid is the most common. And again, it's going to be found in those oils like olive oil, cashew, avocado, almond, and then the actual nuts like almonds, cashews, and walnuts. Again, there isn't a recommendation for this because your body makes it, so it's not something you really need to worry about supplementing or making sure you're getting specific foods. So bottom line with omega fatty acids, they all have benefits, but we want to shoot more, I would say, for more of the omega-3s, keeping that ratio of omega-6 to 3s close. And then the omega-9s we kind of get no matter what. So we're good to go there. Okay, so hope things are making a little more sense as far as the types of fats. It's complicated, right? But here's what we do know. You need fat in your diet. So if you're not getting some of these healthy fat options, let's just touch on some tips to get in more. First is simply adding in some easy snack options or sides with your meals. Nuts and seeds are pretty much the easiest snack out there. throw them in your desk or your car. Super portable, don't go bad quickly. You can do a nut butter on celery or an apple to get in even more nutrients. Make some yummy hummus. Hummus has olive oil in it. Use carrots to dip, not chips, please, if you can. Guacamole with that great healthy fat containing avocado. And again, use pepper slices or carrots to dip. Hard-boiled eggs are also a quick snack to throw in the lunchbox. Next thing is to add more fish to your diet. This is a hard one. Some people hate it, some people love it, some people are allergic to it. So if you can, add fish to your diet. The American Heart Association recommends 2 servings of that fatty fish per week. Serving is considered 3 ounces or 3/4 of a cup. And again, the best option, I'm not saying other fish isn't good, but the best option for fats, healthy fats, is going to be your things like the salmon, herring, sardines, trout, tuna. Tuna and salmon specifically, I know they have those packets at the grocery store that don't even need to be refrigerated. So you can just throw those into your desk, use them as a quick snack, and throw them on a salad at lunch. I got a couple questions I see come in about like whitefish and stuff. Again, it's not bad for you, but since I'm talking specifically about the best options for these healthy fats, those are going to have, the ones that I'm saying is going to have the best amounts of the omega-3s in the healthy options. Any fish is good, not deep fried. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but ideally you can bake or fry in healthy oils. But that's just where we're at on the spectrum of why I'm mentioning these specific fats specifically. Okay. Let's see here. You can throw in those packets. I don't know if I said you can throw them on your salad at lunch too, something like that. Again, in your veggies, in your fats, and your proteins all at once. I'm going to give you a salmon recipe here in a minute to try as well. Next thought on sneaking in some more healthy fats is with those oils. So using more oils like olive, avocado, there are other ones too. We've got sesame, safflower, and then again, depending on your opinion on that coconut oil, these can all be a really easy swap to maybe some more of that processed oils that you might be using right now. And then side note with olive oil, there are some that worry about the smoke point and say you shouldn't use it for very high heat cooking. I've seen research both ways. The latest that I've seen, and is that it's not a huge concern, but there's obviously other options that you can use. So if you're worried about that smoke point, do other options of oils and then keep your olive oil for the medium to low heat and like dressing things like we're going to talk about too. So really, there are quite a few ways to get in some of those healthy fats in your day. Just be mindful of sneaking it in when you can, right? And I know these options aren't for everyone. So, if you hate fish, then try to look at some of these other options. There's always something that someone can do. You can sneak them in there somewhere, right? Let's see. We'll probably have the question of supplementation too. I think I did see that, which is something I can't really give a great answer on, other than they always say it's better to get nutrients from whole foods, right? But if you feel this is tough for you, or if you have concerns with eating some of these foods, do your research, talk to your doctor to find a good option for you if you do go the supplementation route. Okay. All right, I'm going to end with a couple recipes here, like I promised. So avocado egg salad. We have both avocados and eggs in here. So super simple. Get your eggs, get your avocado. We've got lemon juice, onions, salt and pepper, and then some healthy whole grain sprouted, hopefully your healthiest bread, or you can skip the bread if you want. But it really can't get any easier than this, right? You throw all the ingredients in a bowl, mash them up, and you're done. If you don't have the ability to screenshot, these slides will be available for download, like I mentioned at the beginning, once we post this recording on the blog in the next day or so. So don't panic if you don't have time to jot all this down, because I'm going to go on to the next one. But yeah, again, there's tons of good ways. This has tons and tons of good fat in it. And then with avocado, I don't have a recipe for just avocado, but you can use that as any spread on sandwiches. You can use it in, instead of mayo. Avocado is a really, really good option and has so many variations that you can do. All right, how about our salmon recipe? Garlic butter baked salmon. I just love saying that. It sounds delicious. Um, and while there are a lot of words on this slide, I promise it's not complicated. I would never give you a complicated recipe because I would never make a complicated recipe. It just has a lot of good herbs and veggies along with the salmon, right? Heat it up, put it on the sheet. Couple, we have to rub the salmon with the garlic and all that good stuff, but really it ends up just baking, and it's a super quick. I think it's like 20 minutes start to finish, a little more because I feel like they always say, at least it takes me a little bit more, but might just be me too. So got the salmon, got some garlic, which has benefits in it too. And again, with that butter, we're using it in moderation. So we're going to get some good options there. And then I did want to give you some salad dressing options as well. So olive oil based salad dressings are going to be some of your healthiest options as far as the dressings, right? So there's very different flavor options here for you too. We've got apple cider, we've got cilantro lime, and we've got balsamic. So again, all you have to do is throw those ingredients. You can either blend it, or for these ones, you can simply stick it in a mason jar and shake it until it's combined. Mixes up super easy. So yeah, and then with these ones too, you can make it thinner by adding water if needed. I like a thicker one, so I usually don't, but just options there because everyone likes things a little bit different, right? All right, so to summarize, again, I get that it's a complicated topic and some of you are still going to disagree with me maybe on things that I said or have something to add. I haven't been reading all of the comments, but I hope you're helping each other out with things. But really, what we do know for sure is that fats are good, right? But you do need to pay attention to how your body responds to fat, to each type, whatever it may be. And really, balance is the key with your diet, right? We need balance, we need moderation with everything we do. And if you do that with your eating, you're going to get in the good fats. You're going to get in some of the fats that might not be perfect, but if you're in moderation with everything, if you move more towards whole food options, you're going to get good things in the majority of the time. All right. Okay, upcoming webinars next couple months, we've got ergonomics in your everyday life. So this is not just going to be specific to work. This is going to be in your life. The way you sit, the way you stand, the way you move can make a huge difference, right? So that's going to be a really important webinar coming up next month. And then on a similar note, actually, to what we've been talking about today, food to fuel your mind. We're going to talk about foods specifically that are going to help keep your brain at its best. And we're going to talk a lot about fats that month too. So make sure you join us for those. If you do have lifestyle rewards, and if you do have to answer the questions, most of you won't, but if you do, these are the questions. Again, these are going to be found on the slides on the blog here if you do need to answer them. But I'm not going to spend any more time on this one, but you'll know, those of you who know who you are, you'll answer those questions when you submit for points. And then here's our contact information. Social media, obviously we're on that. To watch this webinar, to download the slides for this webinar, for those yummy recipes that I know some of you are asking about, healthcheck360.com/blog. And then you can register for upcoming webinars on there too. And then if you want to chat with us, give us a call, shoot us an email, set up a time to chat, or we can chat via email, whatever works best for you. And we'll go from there. So for those of you who have to jump off, have a fantastic March. Happy March, by the way. Where'd that come from? Hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll stay and chat with some questions if anyone has any.